Good morning to you. We're going to have a quick recap on a topic that we've already treated and the fundamentals of business. This is necessary because of its significant role when it comes to the work of a manager, and that is the business and its environment. It is very, very important for us to be able to understand how the business environment has the potential to influence the operations of a business, and therefore the need for a manager to be very conversant with the issues in the environment of the business. Okay, in order for us to be able to concentrate properly, I will be minimizing my video and for us to concentrate on the slide as I go through the discussions. So this morning's lecture, we're going to look at business and its environment within the context of the role of a manager. What should a manager do? First and foremost, what should a manager know about the business environment? And then what should the manager do after acquiring such a knowledge? So we'll be looking at, we'll be identifying the environments that impact organizations, understand the external factors that influence a manager's role or managers' roles, interpreting internal factors that affect managerial duties, learning why an organization must adapt to the environment. You'll recall, and under fundamentals of business, we spoke about the fact that the business environment or the environment of a business generally can be classified into two major types. We have the external and we have the internal. And these environments are things that a manager needs to be concerned about because they affect the way a business is operated or an organization is managed. All right. Without a proper understanding of this environment, it will be very, very difficult to control and manage your organizations properly. All right. So although managers can't always control their environments, they need to be aware of any changes that occur, because changes ultimately affect their daily decisions and actions. Okay, so whatever might be happening either within the organization or outside of the organization, these are things that a manager needs to be aware of, because as we just noted, it can affect how best you can control your organization. Without a proper knowledge of the things that are happening within your organization as well as your organization, it will be very, very difficult to manage properly. Okay. Not only do managers have to identify the new challenge, but they also have to act quickly and efficiently to remain competitive, especially with regards to the external environment. If you don't pay attention to the activities of your competitors or your rivals, by the time you know what is happening in the external environment, you will have lost all your customers or clients to the other companies with which you provide the same kind of goods or services. So it's very, very important as a manager to be constantly aware of what is happening both within and outside of your organization. Okay, and that brings us to the definition of business environment. What is it? So the set of factors, forces, or variables that exist within and outside the organization that has the potential to influence the continued and successful operations of the organization is what is termed as the business environment. So they are either factors, they are forces or variables, and these factors, forces, or variables could either be within the organization or outside of the organization. They have the potential to influence the successful and continued operations of the business organization. Once again, there are two major types. We have the external environment and we have the internal environment. Okay. So the external environment, as the name goes, are all outside factors, variables, or forces that may affect an organization's makeup. All right. So all of the factors that we'll be looking at very soon that can affect the operations of the organization, but they are not factors or forces that are within the organization. They are outside of the organization. They make up what is known as the external environment of a business. All right. The external environment is divided into two. We have directly interactive. So this environment has an immediate and first-hand impact on the organization. So within the external environment, we have two types. We have directly interactive. They tend to have an immediate and first-hand impact on the business operation. Example is where a supplier increases the price of inputs. Okay, so straight away, if a supplier decides to increase the price of the raw materials that we acquire from the supplier, that has a direct bearing on the cost of production of the business. Okay, the business straight away must be thinking about adjusting their prices because the cost of production will have gone up, unless, of course, they are in a better financial position to absorb the increases in cost of production. This ultimately will be passed on to the consumer. So the activity or the action or the decisions of your suppliers tends to have an immediate and direct impact on the business, even though the supplier is outside of the organization. All right. Another example is where buyers or your customers choose to boycott your products and services. The impact is felt immediately. All right. First, there will be records of sales revenue. Low sales revenue means that profit levels are likely also to be low. And so the decision of your customers or buyers not to buy from you is an example of directly interactive because it tends to have an immediate impact on the business. Then we have the indirectly interactive. So this environment has a secondary and more distant effect on the organization. For example, an increase in the rate of inflation. So unlike suppliers increasing their price or customers deciding not to buy your product and you feel it directly, when there is an increase in the rate of inflation, normally the impact is indirect. All right. So if we go by the example of the supplier probably will increase the price of the inputs that you buy from the supplier because there have been an increase in inflation. So the cost of probably processing those inputs that you buy from the supplier have gone up. So it was the inflation that caused the price of things to go up. And that also caused the supplier to increase its prices before the supplier then decides to pass it on to you. So inflation is general increase in price in goods and services. It doesn't have an immediate bearing on the business until the people that the business interacts with chooses to adjust their prices based on the rates of inflation. Okay. Another way to deal with is that unlike boycotts by customers where the impact may be drastic and immediate, inflation also has a way of influencing the purchasing power of your customers or consumers. All right. Once inflation goes up, their purchasing power gets diminished, and that tends to influence the quantity or the amount of goods that they can buy from you. But unlike their decisions to boycott, this impact that I'm explaining, but indirectly interactive, is somewhat indirect because it is the inflation that will first lead to reduction in purchasing power that then leads to the reduction in the demands for the products or the services of the organization in which you are a manager. Okay, so it tends to have an impact, but the impact is not immediate. The impact is not direct. It passes through certain channels before the organization tends to feel the impact of these indirect variables. All right. So inflation rates, interest rates, and all other variables like that tends to have an impact on the business, but their impact is somewhat remote and indirect. All right. So let's also go back to directly interactive and look at more examples of these forces and factors that fall within the directly interactive forces, all under the external environment of the business. So first, we have owners. So owners, they expect managers to watch over their interests and provide a return on investments. So owners are normally people that have invested in the business and they expect that there'll be some return, either by way of profit, by way of interest, but they need some financial return from these businesses. And it is important to know that because they are the financiers, their decision not to provide the necessary equity funds could lead to a decline in the sustainability or the growth of the business. So they are major players as far as the business performance or organizational performance is concerned. So it is important that as a manager, you find a way to satisfy your owners by taking the right decisions that will make sure that they get the returns that they are looking for on their investment. So they are very, very important force that every manager needs to be mindful of. Okay, if you operating in a public company, and that I mean a company that's listed on a stock exchange, most of the time this will be reflected, the reactions and the disapproval or approval of shareholders or owners, loosely speaking, will be reflected in how the share price are performed. You realize that if you're doing well as a manager, paying good dividends to shareholders, the value of the stock or the share price of the stock tends to go up, and that then attracts other people to want to buy the shares or stocks, and then that leads to higher demands, higher ratings, and that may cause more people to want to invest in this particular type of organization or business. So it's very, very important that you know that the owners of the business, even though they don't have the control day-to-day operations, that their decision as to whether to continually invest or not to invest in the organization can be very, very important in the survival and growth of the business. Okay, point 2, customers. I touched on them much earlier. So the demand satisfaction with the products and services they purchase and use. So managers, you have to know the very beginning reason why a business is set up is actually to satisfy the needs of people. And that is basically the needs of your customers and consumers. So it's very, very important to know the reason for the existence of your organization. If it is even an NGO, you have some client base for which donors may be willing to provide you with funds to support your NGO. So it is important to keep these people satisfied so that your business can continually exist. As I said much earlier, their decision whether to continue patronizing your product and services or boycotting could spell the continuity or otherwise of your organization. So they are very, very important stakeholders that every manager needs to be mindful of, and they operate in the external environment under directly interactive forces in the external environment, right? We spoke about suppliers. They require attentive communication, payment, and strong working relationship to provide needed resources. So payment is very, very critical here, even though all the other points are important. All right. As a manager, you need to make sure that when you take these inputs, you respect the contracts and agreements that you enter into with your suppliers, especially so if you are overly dependent on a particular supplier. Their decision not to supply you anymore can be very important in determining how your business is going to continue. Okay, so suppliers and their decisions whether to provide you with the inputs, their decision as to whether they want to increase their prices, their decision as to whether they want to lower the quality of the inputs that they provide for you as a manager, all tend to have a significant impact on the way your organization will operate. So suppliers are another they are important force in the external environment that managers must be mindful of. Then we have the almighty competitors. They present challenges as they vie for customers in marketplace with similar products or services. So you cannot keep your eye off your competitors and survive. As a matter of fact, the word strategy actually it has its origin from the military. Okay, before you get into warfare, it is important that you have strategy. What it means is that you must have the tactics and the plans in place as to how to conquer your enemy in order to survive. Yeah, so it's similar in business or in operating an organization, even though here it doesn't involve life and death, but it also means the survivor or otherwise of your business organization. So it's important as a manager to know of the moves or the probable moves of your competitors or rivals. You pay attention to the quality of the products and services that they offer. You pay attention to their pricing. In fact, it is very, very important that you have your surveillance on your rivals and your competitors so that you can keep abreast with whatever is happening. Okay, assuming they decide to decrease their prices and the quality of the product is still good, you have to find a way to respond to that. Otherwise, rational consumers will quickly shift from your products and services to that of your competitors. Okay. Then we move to the last category. We have employees and employee unions. They provide both the people to do the jobs and the representation of workforce concerns to management. All right. So within this context, we're presenting them as an external force because they have to go and negotiate with management, and so they are not under the control of management. All right. They have to make case for their colleagues in the same organization and push hard as though management doesn't have any form of control over their operations, because when unions are formed, they are supposed to be the mouthpiece of employees and to agitate and to argue and to advance the cause of these particular employees. So that is why they have been described under the external environment of the business. And it will be in the interest of any shrewd and wise manager to pay attention to the activities of or agitations of their employees and the unions. Their decision not to work hard, or sometimes they may choose not to go on strike. They come to work, but they come to work and they don't put in their maximum best. So their decision not to cooperate and to work hard can affect the sustenance and the profitability of the business. So they are very, very important key stakeholders that every manager needs to be mindful of. All right. You also have to find a way to deal with their bargaining power. Once they get to the position where they can always ask and receive higher salaries and wages, that also tends to impact on the production cost of the business. So there must be a fine balance of trying to address the needs and concerns of employees of organizations, but at the same time, being mindful of how that will impact on the production cost of a business or an organization. All right. So that is that for the directly interactive forces. We've said they are outside of the organization, but tends to have an immediate and direct impact on the business organization. Okay. The indirectly interactive forces may impact on one organization more than another simply because of the nature of a particular business. So what we're saying is that they don't tend to have a direct impact. How they impact your organization depends on the type of organization. In other words, all organizations have their environment as far as the external environment is concerned. So something might be happening that is so bad to some organizations, and yet to other organizations that really present opportunities. And I need to also recap that the reason why the managers must be mindful of the external environment is because this environment tends to provide the opportunities and the threats that an organization must be dealing with. Okay. So within the same environment, an event will happen that could pose as a threat to many businesses, but within the same context of that particular force or factor, it is serving as an opportunity for others. All right. So for example, a company that relies heavily on technology will be more affected by software updates than a company that uses just one computer. All right. So if there is some update in the software, And it is very, very important that you update your machines or computers. The impact of that, or how important that is, might not affect all businesses in the same way. Okay, so for business that uses a lot of IT, a lot of computers, such a change in the environment is very, very significant for them to pay attention to. Okay, than a business that just relies on, say, one computer, the rest of the activities are done manually or with less of IT input. Okay, the other recent example that comes to mind is the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, for so many businesses, it wasn't just an economic threat, but it's also a health threat. All right. In our part of the world, the hospitality industry, I think globally, was badly hit as a result of the COVID pandemic, because people were no longer interested in eating outside. People were no longer going to guest house and hotels because you couldn't know where you will be contracting or getting this COVID-19 virus and so on and so forth. So it was a very, very, very dangerous pandemic. But at the same time, there were businesses that made some good money out of that. Okay, if you take away those that sold, what do you call it, nose masks, if you take away hand sanitizers and those products that are directly related to combating of COVID, we have the telecos that made a lot of money. And most organizations that really relied on online operations made a lot of money, because people then had to do a lot of things online instead of getting out there physically, or person-to-person interactions were limited, and people relied on technology and relied on online activities to undertake their daily activities. All right. And so the telecommunication companies and companies that were into streaming of movies and so on and so forth made a lot of money out of the pandemic. So the same variable that was a major threat to so many organizations and businesses, the same issue force also presented an opportunity to other organizations. All right. So that is the example of indirectly interactive forces. So how well or how badly they affect your business depends upon the type of industry within which you find yourself. All right. So we have some of the other forces under the indirectly interactive. So we have social cultural factors or force. So the social cultural force includes the demographics and values of a particular customer base. Demographics are measures of various characteristics of the people and social groups who make up a society. For example, age, gender, and income are examples of commonly used demographic characteristics. So these are factors that, as a manager, if you want to get into a business or managing an organization, you want to pay attention to, because they have the way of influencing your operations. All right. So income levels very similar to economic force. If they don't have a lot of money, that will influence the extent to which they can buy a particular product and services. Age is very, very important to know where you are operating, what under which age brackets are dominant within the market, target market that you're dealing with. Okay, and does that actually fit the type of product or service that you want to render to that particular market? All right. So for some businesses, if they are more youthful population, they can do well in terms of profit and make more money, because the type of product or service that they are rendering is something that appeals to the youth. For some other businesses, they may have to concentrate on the aged. So if they find themselves where the demographics are actually in favor of youthful population, that type of business that needed to be concentrating on the aged will not do well in such an environment. Okay, the reverse is the business that saw an opportunity through the study of the demographics that this population is a youthful population, and therefore I have to be selling products or rendering services that will appeal to the youth. The same applies to the gender issue. All right. So there are some products that female may want than male, or so on and so forth. So you need to understand the demographics of the markets that you are going to deal with as a manager in order to serve them properly. Okay. And that we have values. So values refer to certain beliefs that people have about different forms of behavior or products. Changes in how society values an item or behavior can greatly affect a business. So you want to also pay attention to the values of people, okay, the beliefs that people have. So if you're dealing with a community where, based on their beliefs, they don't eat pork, all right, it will be in your own interest not to start a business that is into the sale of pork, okay? Or sometimes it's even the color of dresses or clothes that you sell. So in Ghana, if people are celebrating, it's more of white. If people are mourning, it's more of black that they wear. So you need to be able to know the types of clothing that you should be selling when people are happy or in jubilant mood, and the types of clothing that you should be thinking about selling when people are mourning. It can make a lot of difference in whether your business succeeds or not. All right. If you are into international business, this is far, far, far more important to pay attention to. Okay. You need to know the belief systems. What do they eat? What do they eat? What colors do they use for celebration? What colors do they use for mourning? Generally, what are their attitudes about various things in life as far as your kind of business is concerned? It is very, very important because it can make a lot of difference in how well your business is able to operate and succeed. All right. Then we have the political and legal force or factors. So this includes regulatory parameters within which an organization must operate. We have tax policies, trade regulations, and minimum wage legislation are just a few examples of the political and legal issues that may affect the way an organization operates. So very, very important to know the rules, the laws, and regulations of any country or industry within which you operate. All right. So the business could be very, very profitable, but if you don't pay attention to the laws, one day the authority will just come and shut down your business. So it's very, very, very important, especially the tax policies and tax regimes of the countries that you operate in. Okay. So if you can afford it, it is better to say employ a tax consultant, the services of a tax consultant, to be able to help you in probably minimizing your tax burdens, because we have tax avoidance and we have tax evasion, right? Whilst tax evasion is illegal, tax avoidance is smart and legal way to minimize your tax burden. So if you study the tax laws of a particular jurisdiction, it is very, very important to be able to minimize your tax burden in a very, very legal way. So as a manager, it's very, very important, all right? Then you pay attention to minimum wage issues as well. It ranges, it's kind of a balance between legality and ethicality, all right? You can be legal and yet unethical. So you want to be mindful of the jurisdiction within which you find yourself in, and their minimum wage issues. Yes, if you pay the minimum wage, you will have done well, but is that really ethical? Is that something that you can be certain as a manager that you're doing well as far as your employees' welfare are concerned, given the nature of the economy within which you are operating? All right. Yes, so it's totally worse for organizations that actually will employ people and pay them amounts of monies and salaries below the minimum wage of the jurisdiction within which they are operating. So it is important, the laws, the rules and regulations. If you want your business to be in operations for a long time, survival, and become profitable in the long time, you cannot neglect the legal environment of that country or industry within which you're operating. Okay, you have to also pay attention to the political system as well. Have they been practicing democracy? What is the nature of the political stability of the country within which that you're operating in? What are the ideologies of the governing and the main oppositions of the country within which you're operating? All right. Some things to favor capitalism, some are more into socialism. And in theory, those political parties that are more for capitalism tend to support entrepreneurship and business growth and create policies and laws and all that will facilitate the growth of these businesses. Those that are more into socialism believes that the government or the state should be running their affairs as far as the manufacturing and the sale of goods and services are concerned. So they don't normally provide policies and regulations that will be supportive of entrepreneurship. So it's important also to know the political environment of the jurisdiction within which you want to operate. All right. So thirdly, technological force. So technology are basically scientific processes used in changing inputs into outputs. All right. So the resources, the labor, the machine, and so on and so forth that you will use to process your inputs in order to get output out of them is what is known as the technology. It is important to pay attention to the scientific process. It has a bearing on your cost of production. They tend to have a bearing on the quality of the products and services that you can render. They tend to have a bearing on how quickly you can respond to the needs and concerns of your employees. So as a manager, it is very, very important to note that how well you respond to technological changes in your industry can determine the survival or death of your organization. All right. Then we have the economic environment. Very clear issues like interest rates, inflation rate, unemployment, gross national product, exchange rate. These are things that as a business person, you need to be conversant with. Okay, especially in developing countries where we almost import everything, unless you're into the business of exports, where you may be profiting from the depreciation of local currencies in developing countries. If you're into importing and selling of goods from developed economies in a developing economy or poor countries, it is very, very, very important to pay attention to the exchange rate. Right? You can almost eat up all your capital because of your failure to monitor and study the trend in exchange rate. All right? Because by the time you finish selling the product and then going back to import similar type or quantity of product, you wouldn't be able to buy them again because of the exchange rate nature of the jurisdiction within which you operate. So businesses should be careful about the economic environment, especially with regards to exchange rates. All right. Then we have global influences. So this refers to factors in other countries that affect your local organizations. In our context, we're talking about Ghanaian organizations. So something could be happening outside of Ghana. But as a business manager, if you don't pay attention, it has a way of impacting the operations of your organization. All right. So even as a whole country, Ghana, we have our government complaining that the current economic crisis that we're in is as a result of Ukraine-Russia war. All right. Because the supplies of certain necessities, wheat that we use for bread and all manner of products, have run out. We are in short supply of these things because of the war. And as a result, it has affected our economic value. So as a business person, we want to be mindful of what is happening outside of our jurisdictions as well. Recently, tomatoes and other food sellers or traders got into trouble because of the coup d'etat around our neighboring countries, Burkina and other places. All right, some were shot, dead. Some couldn't bring in the goods that they had bought, the tomatoes they had bought from Burkina Faso into Ghana. because of a conflict that is not in Ghana but elsewhere. Okay, so if they were probably mindful of their environment, maybe they wouldn't have gone into that particular trade, gone into that business at that particular point in time because of the crisis that was going on around us. So as a business manager, you shouldn't only be interested in your domestic environment, but you must also be interested in your external environment. All right. So let's quickly look at the internal environment of a business. So an organization's internal environment is composed of the elements within the organization, including current employees, management, and especially corporate culture, which defines employee behavior. Okay, so from the name, internal environment are forces within the organization. External environments are forces outside of the organization. So we're talking about within the internal, we're talking about employees, we're talking about management, we're talking about corporate culture, and how all of this influence employee behavior. Note that when we're discussing external environment, we spoke about employee and employee unions. And now under internal environment, also we're talking about employees. So under the internal environment, employees, we're seeing them as the normal understanding of what employees are supposed to do. They have to come to work early, they have to come and work hard for their business organizations or for the organizations in which they are employed, and so on and so forth. In the context of the external environment, as I indicated or explained earlier, the unions were now supposed to be fighting for their employees. So they were not strictly under the control, so to speak, whenever they are into their union agitations and advocacy. They don't operate as though they are under management. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to go and bargain for management, or they wouldn't be able to bargain well in the interest of their colleagues in the organization. So it's very, very important to know how employees play those dual roles. One time they are under external environment, another time they are under internal environment of the business. Okay. So although some elements affect the organization as a whole, others affect only the manager. So as a manager, you want to be very, very important. It is very, very important that you pay attention to your internal environment. Generally, for example, if employees decide not to work hard or to boycott or to go on strike, it is the general productivity of the business that will go down. Okay, but they can also choose to come after you, the CEO or the manager of the organization. And this time around, it wouldn't just be about the organization, but it should be about you, the manager. So it's very, very important for us to know this. Okay. So some of the elements that make up the internal environment of a business or an organization includes the organizational mission statements. It describes what the organization stands for and why it exists. It explains the overall purpose of the organization and includes the attributes that distinguish it from other organizations of its type. So the mission statement is very, very important. If you study strategic management, you come to realize that there are about 9 components of a good mission statement. All right. Why is it very, very important as a manager to be abreast and to make your employees aware? Because it contains almost everything about the organization. It will tell you the product and services that the organization wants to produce. It tells everybody the type of markets that the organization wants to serve. It will tell everybody the type of technology the organization wants to use. It explains the minds of the organization for its employees and its other external stakeholders. All right. So it's very, very, very important to write a very clear mission statement to get everybody to contribute in promoting the welfare and growth of the business organization. If you don't have a clear mission statement, what it means is that it will be very, very difficult for people to know exactly what they're in the organization for. So it's an important internal environment that all managers must pay attention to. Okay, so the next point is company policies. So policies are guidelines that govern how certain organizational situations are addressed. You need policies in place in order to avoid a constant need for meetings and to provide the clarity that employees need as to what they should be doing when they come to work. All right. So there should be policies on everything. If you're into, say, banking, there must be policy for, say, the granting of loans. Okay. What show a loan applicant, what are the requirements that the loan applicant must meet before this particular application is approved? This should be a policy so that you don't always have to go for a meeting to decide whether a particular applicant qualifies for a loan or not. All of that leads to waste of time and doesn't provide clarity for the organization. So it is important for company policies to clearly indicate what is expected of employees and all stakeholders in various facets of the organization. That can help enormously in increasing the productivity of organizations. So company policies are very important internal force or factors that every organization must pay attention to. Close to that, we have the structures, the formal structures, the hierarchical arrangement of tasks and people in the organization. If it is not done well, what it means is that there could be duplication of tasks. People will be assigned to places that they don't have the competencies, skills, and knowledge for. And that also will lead to reduction in productivity. But if you had the right structures in place, it could lead to better productivity. It could more significantly lead to in the way at which a company or the organization will be responding to customer complaints and other needs of their stakeholders. Okay, if it is a tall organization, it tends to be very bureaucratic. If there's a flattened structure, it is easier to respond to customer complaints and concerns in a more faster and friendlier way. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a flatter structure is always better than a tall structure. It depends on the mission of the organization. What kind of product, what kind of service are they offering? That really must be in line or must be in sync with the type of structure that organization must pursue. So it's very, very important to have the right type of structures, formal structures in the organization, because it can make a lot of difference in the productivity and how things are done within the organization. So the formal structures are also important internal force that a manager must ensure that they have the right structures in place. Okay, then we have the organizational climate. The climate that you create in your organization as a manager is very, very important. So this is the overall tone of the workplace, and the morale of its workers are elements of the daily climate. It is a byproduct of the company's culture. Is it a climate where employees feel happy and excited about working within? Okay, they come to work and they are not agitated. They don't feel like going home because the climate is right. They are treated with respect. Their needs are catered for, and so on and so forth. Okay, if there's the opposite, then it can have an adverse impact on their willingness to contribute to the organization. So creating the right type of climate is an important force within the environment that can influence the operations and the efficiency of the organization. Close to that, we have the managerial philosophies. Okay, so the manager's set of personal beliefs and values about people and work, and as such, is something that the manager can control. So your personal beliefs and values about people and work is very, very important. All right. If you go after Michael Gore's theory, X assumption that human beings are lazy and therefore they have to be coerced, they have to be forced before they can work or contribute their quota to the organization, it can influence the way you treat your employees. All right. If you also believe in his theory, Y, that says that human beings have the capacity to think, they are creative, they are innovative, they need least supervision and direction in order for them to work. That will also influence the way you interact and work with your employees. So the managerial philosophies, all right, very, very important to have the right type of philosophy for the right type of organization, the right type of people or situation within which you find yourself. Okay, when it gets to things like this in management, the answers are not always straightforward. Most of the time, it depends on the situation. All right, so it is not all cases that you should be leaning towards theory X. In the same way, it's not in all cases that you should be believing in theory Y. All right, if you don't know when to go for what type of philosophy, that can greatly affect the operations of the organization that you're dealing with. We'll be dealing more into that when we deal with other topics under leadership and things like that. We'll be discussing a lot of that, especially within situational or contingency approach to management and leadership. Okay, then we have sixth one is managerial leadership styles, very close to what I just spoke about. So the number of workers involved within a problem-solving or decision-making process reflects the manager's leadership style. So it is very, very important that you have the right leadership style. It's an important force within an organization. Okay, you might have all the structures in place. You have a good vision, you have a nice mission statement, but if you don't have the right leadership style to pull these resources together, to harmonize them, to create that desire and passion to work hard towards the attainment of the organizational objectives, the resources really will just be there. Okay, so it is important. The leadership style is an important force or variable within the organization that can determine the success or the failure of a particular business organization. All right. So yes, then we'll come to the final one that we might have all right now know that clearly should be part of the internal environment. So the resources of the organization. We're talking about the people, the information, facilities, infrastructure, machinery, equipment, finances. All of these things are important internal forces or factors that can influence the operations of the organization. So yes, so it is important that as a manager, you know these things because they can spell your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, if you get to know that your rivals, for example, do not have the right type of finances, or if you want technology, equipment, machines, then and you have those ones, you can ride on those ones to gain what is known as a competitive advantage in that particular industry within which you are competing. So you have to know your resources because from them you can get to know your strengths and you can build on those strengths to gain what is known as a distinctive competence. And out of the distinctive competence, you get a competitive advantage, which can then help you to win the market. All right. So the resource, the people here, once again, we are referring to your employees. What are their skill set? What are their knowledge levels? And all one of things, how well are they able to work together as a team or as a group? That can be very important in determining the success of your business organization. Okay. Then we move to the last force or factor in the internal environment. Very, very important, even though it is not tangible or physical. If you pay attention, most of the things that we spoke about so far are not, apart from the last one that is probably resources, all right? Their structures, their systems, they tend to be intangible. So it is with organizational culture. So it's referred to as the organization's personality, okay? The culture of an organization distinguishes it from others and shapes the actions of its members. So what type of culture is the organization projecting? Either to their internal stakeholders, i.e. employees, or to their external stakeholders. Very, very important. And there are four main components of organization culture. First, we have values. So the basic beliefs that define employee successes in an organization. What is important in that particular organization? What does the organization project? If they want to promote somebody, if they want to award somebody, if they want to commend somebody, what is it that is important to the organization? Is it excellence? Is it good customer service? Is it meeting some financial targets? All of those things tends to communicate to employees as to how they should behave. All right. If you are a student of corporate governance, you realize that most of the scandals that have occurred in major corporations were because they place too much unhealthy values on financial performance or attaining financial targets, where employees were now trying to do all manner of things to be able to hit these targets, because they have come to realize that those were the things that were valuable to the organization. Otherwise, the values of the organization was about attaining financial targets by all means possible. So it's very, very important. If you put value on customer excellence, customer service excellence, you'll be surprised how all of your employees will adjust their behavior to be able to serve their customers properly when they come to your organization. If you put value on excellence, it will surprise you how employees want to change their working behavior and attitudes in order to provide excellent customer service, excellent production, excellent marketing campaigns, and so on and so forth. Okay, so values, very, very important component of organizational culture that every manager must seek to promote the right type of values. Then we have heroes. So very connected to values. A hero is an exemplary person who reflects the image, attitudes, or values of the organization and serves as a role model to other employees. So what do you celebrate? Who do you celebrate as an organization? And as I indicated, it comes back to the values. Okay, most organizations want to celebrate and champion and promote and recognize people that are doing that which they consider to be the values of the organization. And it is important for them to be celebrated because you want others to emulate that type of behavior. And so you want others to want to be like the hero. And that is why these heroes are celebrated in organizations. The whole idea is that that particular person is an embodiment of the values or the attitude or the image that the organization wants. And so if we have somebody, we want everybody to be like that person in terms of their behavior and attitude and everything in order to reflect what is important to the organization. Okay, so heroes are also very important. And as a manager, you need to pay attention to find out those that are behaving the way that you want and to find a way to raise them to the status of heroes so that others that want to get the kind of reward or attention that they are getting will be compelled to behave like the heroes that they envy, so to speak. All right. Then we have rites and rituals as part of the components of organizational culture. So rituals and rites within our context, most of the time, bring some negative impression. All right. We're thinking about killing of animals and human beings and all that. No, in business management, that is not the meaning of rites and rituals. All right. So rites are routines and rituals are routines or ceremonies that a company uses to recognize high-performing employees, as we just explained, under heroes. So the events that are held to recognize the heroes of the organizations are most of the time are the rites, all right, and rituals. But the rituals goes deeper. Rituals are normally kind of standard operating procedures that must be undertaken anytime in the organization before a particular task or an activity is done. Okay, so it's almost like something that must be done constantly. So for example, in most organizations, a ritual for middle-level managers to meet every Monday to discuss how they want to probably plan for the week. Okay, what is going to happen and what shouldn't happen, what they intend to do within the week. So every Monday mornings, they tend to have a meeting to discuss what is going to be done for the rest of the weekend, so on and so forth. So that is an example of a ritual. All right. For some organizations that are into production or manufacturing, the ritual might be to check the efficacy or the functionality of certain equipment. Okay, if it is a transportation company, they may want to check the various oils. They want to check the gasoline oil levels. They may want to check certain basic things before any car moves out of the garage of the particular company. Okay, so daily routines, things that must be done before the day's activity begins is what could be classified as rituals. And if you have right rituals in place in your organization, it can create significant difference in terms of how successful your organization can go. Okay, as I just indicated, sometimes major accidents and problems could be solved by just paying attention to daily routines. Okay, not the major maintenance, but the rituals, everyday things that are supposed to be done before you start a machine, before a car moves out of the garage, and all of those things will help save the company a lot of money. Okay. Then last aspect of the organizational culture is the social networks that are permitted. So the informal means of communication within an organization. Is it an organization that employees feel very free to either want to interact with their subordinates or peers, or can they actually talk to senior members freely, and so on and so forth? Okay, so that environment is also very, very important, especially so if you want to create a creative culture, an organization that is creative in terms of coming up with new ideas and suggestions. The social network needs to be very strong so that people feel free, people feel liberated, to empowered to be able to share their opinions without any fear of being punished for that. All right. Yes. So that brings us to the end of our discussions on the business environment as far as the internal and the external environment are concerned. And you realize that it's very, very important that as a manager, you pay attention to this. But so the last component deals with how should a manager try to adapt to changes or to this environment, the external and the internal. So first, managers can monitor the environment through boundary spanning. That is the process of gathering information about developments that will impact the future of the organization. So as a manager, make it part of your responsibility to go beyond your organization, right? Yes. So you want to be abreast as much as you can with what is happening within your organization, but you need to engage in what is known as boundary spanning as well. You want to gather as much information as possible beyond your own small environment or office so that you can better understand what is going on. Okay. So managers can access information through a variety of sources. So customer and supplier feedback, very, very important. Professional trade and government publications. So these publications can help you. Professional trade and government publications can provide some information. Industry associations and personal contacts. So whatever be the case, try as much as possible to gather information beyond what you just know as a manager. All right. And the first point, customer complaints especially can be very, very, very important to you. Get to know, don't run away from complaints and concerns of customers and consumers. That is the better way to actually improve upon the products and services that you render. So go beyond all that we've learned as far as the environment is concerned, boils to the point that a manager must get to the point where they don't just limit themselves to their environment in terms of the knowledge base, but they want to gather as much information as they can about issues happening within the organization as well as outside the organization. Okay. Managers can also actively work to influence their external environment through lobbying and using the media to influence public opinion. So the external environment likely are things that are outside of the control of the manager, but you can still try and lobby, all right? And we've heard about cases where the Parliament of Ghana, some organizations have tried lobbying our MPs, members of parliament, to get some legislation passed and so on and so forth. It's part of way of going about business. Only that sometimes that's ethical concerns where lobbying could extend to the point of bribery, all right, or giving of bribes. So there's a thin line, and managers want to be careful of that. But in all cases, lobbying is one way by which you can influence your external environment. One policy from government, as we've discussed much earlier, could be the end of your business. So if you have people in influential positions that you can talk to find a way to either modify this policy or stop it altogether, yes, a manager may want to exploit that, all right? Then they can use media also to influence public opinion on certain government decisions. Yeah, like if the government want to increase corporate taxes or any type of tax at all, normally the business community rely on the media to hammer on the concerns and worries about business people in order to influence the opinion of government and that decision by government. All right. Lastly, we're saying that managers can gather information by conducting a thorough evaluation of the internal operations of the organization. So far, we've been concentrating a lot on the external, but also it is important that the manager gets to know about his internal environment. In fact, that can be the springboard in actually dealing with the shocks that will be coming from the external environment. Okay, since the manager can control this type of environment, it is very, very important that the manager gets to know what is happening within the external environment. So yes, that brings us to the end of this particular lecture. It is very important for us to once again understand the business environment before we move on to the core functions of a manager, such as planning, organizing, leading, and control. All of that is hinged on a proper understanding of the business environment of any organization within which you are operating. Thank you very much for your attention.